Hey guys, how's it going? Just getting things underway. Well, not quite. We're waiting until 2:30 to officially start the meeting. But for now, anyway, welcome to anybody that's arriving early. We've got about 8 minutes, and that's when I will really jump into the class discussion and the lecture for today. Just getting my marker situation settled. Thanks, guys. Good afternoon. Hi, Adeline. How are you? Still people filing in. You know, it's going to take a few minutes until everyone's arriving. But welcome back to class. I'm just going to type into the chat bar little greetings to everybody. Anybody here, feel free at any point to just give a little shout out, say hi if you're in the chat. It's nice to see a couple names show up over there, so feel free to say hello or anything else. And yeah, we'll be really starting here in just about 6 minutes. I'm gonna close a window over here to make it a little more quiet. Hold on. Hey, Eddie. What up? Yeah, you guys know I have a cat, right? I have two. This is Eddie, little Edwin. Hey, Eddie. He's really shy, but not in front of the camera, I guess. Check out this boy's belly. How crazy is that, right? Am I Joe Exotic with this boy? I mean, what is this? It's like a panther, a leopard? I don't even know. Good kitty. Good boy. Good afternoon to all you guys. Hello. Watch out. Still got about 5 minutes, so not to rush. We're going to start right at 2:30. Give everybody a chance to get here to the live stream. Okay, we're running up the numbers. We got 16 so far. Okay. Hope you guys are doing good, enjoying the first week of classes. Want me to draw a bird? Boom. Pretty sophisticated drawing. Good afternoon, Gabriel. Hey, nice to see you here. The next few moments, I'm sure we'll get a lot more people. Ooh, 3D, that's going to be too hard. That is 3D, though. You're just seeing it from far away. No? Hi there. Hi, Kimberly. And Jennifer, and Flavio, and everybody else there. Aritza, Alex, Joe. Hi there. Okay, still a few minutes. Welcome to everybody who's arriving now to our meeting. Picasso, I don't know, a lot of Cubist stuff that he did, so some of it wasn't exactly lifelike, but that doesn't mean it was bad. Hey, Caitlin. Bye-bye, Birdie. Oh, no. Eddie. cause a ruckus. We'll see if I have to move him to the next room or something. Hey, Luke. All right, good. Everybody keep on filing in. Let me, real quick, my day's been pretty good. I've been just teaching and doing office hours and stuff so far today. Hang in there. I'm going to switch to another tab, so I'm not going to be looking at the camera for a minute because I just want to like send a quick reminder to our class that they should get into the meeting. Okay. Hey there. Hi, guys. Just a second. Okay, just for double, triple checking on the success of the meeting, I went back and just sent another reminder like I sent one earlier today. Okay, let me double check on the questions and comments I've seen here. Masterpiece drawing of the bird. Thank you guys for that one. Cat's name, this is Eddie right here. His sister is Princess Peachy. She's, I don't know, sleeping, napping somewhere around here. But that's the deal. Okay, guys, welcome back to class. I see more of us are still filing in, but we got a good amount of people so far. We're about at 60. You know, this is a large, oversized class, so we're going to get probably a few more still showing up. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here to our first lecture, really, of the semester in Critical Thinking, Philosophy 105. Okay, so thanks, everyone, again, for your attendance and for your hard work all week getting back situated in the school in this, you know, interesting and, you know, kind of tenuous time that we all find ourselves in. But we're here together, and we're going to have, I think, a really good meeting and a good semester overall. So let's just jump into it. Now I'm going to use the whiteboard a lot of times that I've set up here. I have like a larger whiteboard that I've ordered that should be showing up later on in the week. But for now, anyway, we're going to work with this one. Now, so this class is all about critical reasoning, critical thinking, how to be a better critical reasoner and writer. And just hello to all you guys saying hello. I appreciate your comments in the chat. So we want to be good critical thinkers, right? But that means that we really got to start off at the basics. What does it even mean, though, to be a good critical thinker? What is this thing that we're trying to make progress towards? What is this goal that we're trying to achieve? So let's start off with that. Sorry, Eddie, go down. Okay. Good critical thinker. So I'm going to put the definition or concept of it up here a little bit, and then we're going to try to describe some examples if we can as a group. Okay, so beginning with this. Good critical thinker. So for you over there at home or wherever you're at watching this live stream, I'm using the whiteboard just like in a classroom a professor would use it. So you can take any notes that you would like from the class noteboard, okay? So what's a good critical thinker? It's basically this type of person. It is a person that will not believe a claim, okay? They won't believe a claim that they hear unless it's based on some kind of good argument or good evidence, okay? So, oh my goodness. Eddie, let me just move him, okay? Sorry. Sorry. All right, guys. I'll let him back out eventually, but I want to make sure that I get some of these notes up there clearly, okay? Good critical thinker, what is it? Okay, so it is a person that will not believe a claim unless it is based on a good argument or good evidence. Continue to the next line. So there's two parts to this definition, and I'm just giving you the first part for now. What it says there is that a good critical thinker is a type of person that would not believe a claim that they hear, that someone tells them, that they hear from a friend, from media, from any source of information whatsoever. They're not going to believe the claim unless it's based on a good argument or good evidence. Matthew, reading an article title is not enough. Yeah, that would be, I think, a fair point, right? So if the title just says, America's doomed, and you don't read it, and you don't see the reasons for it, then you don't have yet a good enough reason to agree with the claim. So you would need some type of better argument or evidence. A good critical thinker is willing to believe things, but they don't just say casually believe claims with no further question. The instinct of a good critical thinker when someone makes a statement or claim to them is not just, wow, I never knew that, that must be true, but instead it's a critical question like, are you sure? What's the proof? Can that be proven? How do you really know? This is the other kitty. This is Peach, Princess Peach. She got a lot of spots, right? But she's getting in here where her brother's not, so I'm going to move her over to where her brother is, okay? Here you guys go. Good kitties. Okay. Sorry. They're still really young. You know, they're not even 5 months right now, so they're always getting into everything. Right. So what I was just telling you is that a good critical thinker is a person that's not going to believe a claim without good reason or evidence to support it. If that's the case, they're going to say, well, I'm not really sure. I need some better reasons to agree with that or to believe that that's true. So they're kind of a little given to skepticism. They're picky about what they're going to believe. I don't want to carry a negative connotation with the term picky, but you know, they're scrutinizing, they're critical. They only allow things to pass into their belief system that can be somehow verified with quality argument or evidence. So it's like a filter that information has to pass through to get into the head of a critical thinker. They don't just take everything at face value as a claim that's true. They wait until they have a better sense of the argument or evidence. And if there's a good reason and a good argument for it, then they're going to be able to believe it, but not otherwise. Okay, now the other part of a good critical thinker, second part of definition I'm going to add to this, is that as well as they won't believe a claim unless it's based on good argument or evidence, they also, when they make claims to other people, they make sure to provide good argument or evidence to support those claims that they make. Okay, so, and when making claims to others, they provide good argument / evidence to support and back their claims up. To support their claims. Okay, so there's basically like two elements to this idea here. The good critical thinker, when they receive information from others, when the information is being sent towards them, if you want to use that term, they vet the information. They expect and they require some type of decent reasons or argument to give credibility to the claim. And if that's not there, then they just say, well, I don't know, and that's not something that I think is worthy of my belief, at least not until I hear a better reason. On the other hand, sometimes you're in the position of making claims to another party, right? So information, we're human beings and we deal with information. Sometimes we are the one receiving it, like when we read something or we hear it on television or we see it reported or a friend, a parent, or whoever tells us something. In another case, we are the one that's disseminating a claim to another person, putting forward the claim to others. So since a critical thinker requires evidence or argument for them to believe a claim, they do the same when they make claims to others. They provide reasons and evidence and argument. A thinker wouldn't just come to you and say, Cal State Fullerton is the best college. And then if you ask them why, they say, I don't know, that's just what I believe. They would be able to give some type of reasonable answer as to why that claim is true. So they would come with reasons. They might say, well, it's because we have one of the best graduation rates, or we have one of the most diverse campuses, or we have a very strong school of business, or whatever the case is. They would give some type of reasons, and that would lead to justifying the conclusion, okay? But they wouldn't just sort of shrug their shoulders and say, I don't know, what do you want from me? I don't have reasons. That's just something that I think. That's not giving any kind of basis for others to believe it. And in the same way, a critical thinker would not just accept a belief with no further inquiry if there was no kind of argument or evidence to back it up. Okay, now, I want to next talk to you guys about the other side of the coin. We've heard now what it is to be a good critical thinker. What is a bad critical thinker, or at least a not so good critical thinker? Well, it's exactly the contrary of this. So I'm going to clear the board, provide that information here, and then we're going to go into some examples, okay? So I'm going to erase here. The whole lecture is recorded and permanently archived. So anything that I'm talking about here, anything that you're watching here, you can go back and view it at any later time for your notes, for your review, or just for your own personal interest. So like if, for example, you saw the board cleared off, and there's some note that you hadn't had a chance to write down, you can simply replay the video and get back to it at your own leisure. Okay, so what's a bad critical thinker, though? Okay, so a bad critical thinker is, as you might imagine, a person who lacks in both of those ways that we just talked about. So first of all, this is a person who will believe things, even if they're not based on any kind of good argument or good evidence. Okay, so this is a person that will believe claims that are not based on good argument or evidence. And likewise to the second part of the definition. And when making claims to other people, the bad critical thinker does not have the ability to defend their own claims with reasons or evidence. So, to support the claim, to back up the claim. Okay, so that's the definition that you see there, bad critical thinker. What is it? This is a person who, unlike the good critical thinker, will believe claims that are not even based on good arguments or evidence. So they're kind of like very casual and loose with the things they believe. If someone says something, if it sounds good to them, maybe they'll be like, sure, I think that's true. But they don't ask questions like, well, what proof is there? How do you really know? What makes that something that's plausible or likely, you know? So a bad critical thinker doesn't criticize the incoming information. They just take it as a given. And also, when the bad critical thinker makes a claim to someone else, they lack that capacity to justify the claim by backing it up. Okay, Kelly, you give the example of the Earth being flat. That's one belief that I think maybe some bad critical thinkers might have, although the cleverest people in the silly flat Earth community, which I hope there's not many out there, but unfortunately some people are convinced for whatever reason that Earth's a flat surface. There's ample evidence to completely disprove that. I mean, come on, like, how could it be that the surface of the Earth, if it's a disk, then why is it that in some parts of the planet it's nighttime and other parts of the planet it's daytime? That can only make sense if there's a curved surface that's rotating on its axis, which exposes part of that sphere to the sunlight and other parts that don't. If it's a disk, then the entire surface of it should be completely illuminated in the sun all at the same time. And if it's a disk, then things should fall off. There would also be no explanation of the planetary orbits or of the motion of satellites around the sphere of the Earth. I mean, the photographic evidence also exists. So yeah, you mentioned the case of the Earth being flat, so I just do a little digression where I give an example of all the reasons that it's not a good argument towards that conclusion. But anyway, yeah, bad critical thinkers of the world, they have beliefs, but when people ask them, how do you know that? Or why do you know that? Or why do you think that? They just say, I don't know, I just think so, and I can't really tell you why, or at least I can't give you any kind of good reasons why. So anyway, we want to be more like the good critical thinkers of the world. We want to make progress as much as possible away from this way of being and operating, closer towards the ideal mentioned before of the good critical thinker, a person who's scrutinizing over information, who won't believe things unless they can be somehow demonstrated by good argument or evidence, and also the type of person who's able to back themselves up and make credible arguments based on good evidence for their own conclusions. Yeah, Job, I don't know. Let's we can study the question, but yeah, anyway. So that's that. I next wanted to see if you guys could help come up with some examples of both things. But before I ask for that, let me just add the one more point. Why is it so important, though, for us to be good critical thinkers? Well, we live in a world where it's actually quite important for you to have a real appreciation of factual information. If you're not a good critical thinker, you could be so easily manipulated, exploited, deceived, misled by other clever people who see poor critical thinkers of the world as easy targets for whatever predatory goal that person might have. There's a lot of competition in the world and in the marketplace. If somebody knows that you're not going to ask tough questions about, let's say, I don't know, the desirability of a product or service, then they might be able to make you a very weak sales pitch that you're going to agree with, which ends up enriching them and leaving you with an unnecessary product that you might not have needed or wanted if it wasn't for this appeal to you that's not based on good argument or evidence. And that's just one example. You want to be well informed across the board, whether it comes to your consumer behavior, to your beliefs concerning socio-political matters, intellectual matters, and issues of public policy. So we all, therefore, are going to be well served by being better than worse at critical thinking. You don't want to be so easily manipulated or misled as to believe claims that are not based on very good evidence or reasons. No, I know, Job. I was kidding too, just so that's clear. Now, let me see a few more of the questions that are in here, or comments. Alondra, you say, where does emotion lay when it comes to bad or good critical thinkers? Like when someone gets defensive. A good critical thinker tries their best to limit the influence of emotion on their judgments about what's true and false. Sometimes when you are emotionally invested in a particular claim being true, then you're less likely to take seriously evidence against it, and more likely in that state of bias to take greater weight behind any evidence that might even appear to support it. So we want to be rational and fair-minded when we weigh arguments and evidence, not giving more weight to claims that support the things we want to believe, and less weight to claims that tend towards conclusions that we just don't like. Because in the end of, at the end of the day, the world and the facts of the world are not formed around suitability to the interests of any individual person or people in general, right? So we want to have a clear and a correct appreciation of facts. That's why we build up these skills like we are doing in this class. So I just wanted to ask you guys then, Joe, could it not be a good thing to be trusting in humanity overall, at least? I think that's too broad to be answered. The question is, should we not trust in humanity? I don't think every source of information in humanity is, let's say, unreliable and irrational. So I think it really requires you to have judgment and discernment to be able to distinguish reliable from unreliable claims, good arguments from bad arguments. To paint with a broad brush and say humanity in the broadest sense is deceptive and unreliable would, I think, be a bit too much. But it is fair to say you should be have a healthy dose of skepticism as you go about the world trying and willing to things that could be somehow shown through evidence. Now, I wanted you guys to help me with the next part of the lecture. Seeing these definitions and this little discussion we've had, throw out some examples if you can. Now, here's what I'm asking for. Give me perhaps an example, if you will, of what you think could be considered a good critical thinker. Now, this could be either a particular person, or if you don't want to be so specific, it could be like a type of profession or office or station in life. And then if you can just tell me what that example might be, then we can have a little discussion over some of your examples. So what, for example, could be some good critical thinkers? Either types of people or specific people, and think of the reason for your example. Let's see what you come up with. And just so we're all clear about this, there is a small delay, like of a few seconds or 5 seconds or so, between when you send your comment and then when I receive it. So I'm mindful of that. Okay, I see your examples showing up here. Araceli, you give scientist. And good example for sure, because the scientist basically has to collect data through observation of the world and then use that data to explain cause and effect relationships between things in reality. They have to try and provide some evidence for a hypothesis that they have, which they then can test. So you can't be a scientist and just sort of say, here's what I think is true. Why? I don't even know. That's just what I feel like. That's not science. Science is based on empirical evidence. So it definitely involves good critical thinking, sure. I see the example, Sean, of lawyer, and others are also writing lawyer. Very good example also. At least to be a lawyer, you have to be able to make a case before a judge or jury of the facts concerning a case. If you're the prosecuting attorney, you're trying to make the case of guilt, and you're trying to persuade the audience in the jury that beyond a reasonable doubt, I've proven guilt through these, demonstration of evidence. If you're the defense attorney, you're trying to make the opposite case to the jury, that we have not proven based on evidence that the individual is guilty. So if you're a good lawyer, you have to be able to present a case to lead to the conclusion desired by your client or agency. You can't just go up there and be like, look, this guy's guilty. I don't know why. Just come on. Can we get this over with and just vote for guilt? You have to make the case. You have to make the argument and give the evidence. Also, some have mentioned judges, and that's also true. Sometimes the judge is the one that weighs the facts of a case in some types of court proceedings. In other cases, at least they do have to make sentencing decisions. And in every single case, they can't just be like, here's my judgment and it's based on nothing, or I can't tell you how I came up with the view. It's their obligation legally and I think morally as good judges to provide the reasoned basis for their judicial conclusions. I see the example of doctor. I think you might be thinking like a medical doctor, and that's a good example too. A medical doctor's job, of course, is to provide a reasonable diagnosis of a person's illness as well as a course of treatment. And they have to do that by considering the facts of their medical history as well as the symptoms that they're currently experiencing based on the doctor's knowledge of medicine and practice. So they can't just be like, yeah, you have cancer and that's just a hunch. Who knows if it's true or false? I don't have any real reasons, but it's sort of how I feel. That would not be a doctor doing their job in a responsible way. By the way, I'm a doctor as well, but I have a doctorate. A lot of times when people say doctor, they're just thinking of the medical doctor. But if you actually know, the word doctor in its original meaning from Latin has to do with to profess. So a research-based academic doctorate is actually more a true sense of the original meaning of the term in the medical case. But anyways, we all know the distinction. Okay, so I'm looking at other examples. Dr. Fauci, that's I think a good example. He's a public health professional, and it's his job, in the government to try and provide guidelines for people to follow in order to secure the best public health outcomes. It's based on, the knowledge that we have of the propagation of viruses and how they tend to behave in a pandemic. So, he's been working for a long time in the higher echelons of national health programs and administrations of various political parties. I believe he first came to national prominence for his work during the AIDS crisis of the 80s. But at any rate, whether it's Fauci or other individuals in the public health establishment, these people cannot really rise through the ranks if they don't have intellectual skill to give rational arguments and evidence for the conclusions that they reach, which they then provide to the public. Employers, you say, Tuan? I guess it does depend. An employer, if they're a good employer, is going to have to make a judgment about the desirability of a candidate to work at their company or business. If they don't have a good reason to make that choice, then they're probably going to be a unsuccessful employer or business owner. So yeah, I see some people referring to like these internet, like Twitter political figure like Ben Shapiro. I know some people talk about his whole mantra of facts over feelings or something. I don't know. I mean, the conclusions that people reach in political discourse are sometimes based on assumptions that are not generally shared. Like some people hold like very robust free market principles when it comes to economic theory. Other people hold more Keynesian principles, which have to do with government regulation over the market. So I'm not so sure that I would say every conclusion that such a person reaches on either side is uncontested, but at least by providing reasons and evidence, you have an intellectual foundation for the things you're saying, even if they may be incorrect conclusions in some cases. I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree, but just so that you know, there are figures on either side politically who make fair-minded arguments towards conclusions about policy and other matters. And it's not the domain only of, let's say, conservative or liberal thinkers in the public arena. Okay, you saying me, I appreciate that. I hope I live up to the standards that I'm trying to impress upon you guys, my students. I do my best to stay informed and to be careful about the things that I believe. Let's go on to the other side, though. What do you think could be examples of bad critical thinkers now that we've covered this good side of the coin? And once again, I'm asking from the perspective, what could be either specific people or types of people, professions, or offices that you think you could say are bad critical thinkers. Okay, Jamie, just jumping right in and saying the president, yeah, we all know about the criticisms that he has received in his role. Probably there's always been criticisms of individuals serving in high office. I don't want to presuppose anyone's political perspective, although I know that if you look at the demographic breakdown, people who are younger, of course, it seems heavily favor the Democratic Party. But there are fair criticisms to be made of any person who assumes power. When a person is appointed to these high positions of responsibility, we hope and we expect that they'll execute their office with high intellectual standards, that they attend to the best arguments and evidence, and they're informed by those matters when they make their choices. Whether or not Trump fits this description is something that I would not wish to weigh in on in the course of this discussion, but certainly presidents of both parties have been subjected to that kind of criticism. I know that some will argue that we are seeing inefficiency and maladministration at the executive branch right now. This is a criticism that we've seen before. Perhaps it has an added salience right now because we are in an election year. At the end of the day, in a democratic society, it's our civic obligation to vote and make our judgment clear through voting as to who we prefer or don't prefer when these discussions arise. But very good example. I don't want to skip over that or minimize it. I know there are passionate feelings on both sides of that. So what else? We've covered the Trump case. Let's see. Karen, okay, yeah, the concept of, let's say, an entitled, typically white female who uses their, I guess you could say, privilege to try and enforce standards of conduct against people primarily going to be minority. without a full understanding of the privilege that they have, or the unfairness of the application of criticism to the subject that they're interacting with. Yeah, I mean, certainly people who take bold positions without a full appreciation of all the facts are bad critical thinkers. If I'm thinking of some of the examples seen on social media, I don't know, the woman in Brooklyn who called the police on a guy because he was telling her that she should not have her dog in the bird watching area of Central Park. You might argue that she was operating from emotion, or she was in the grip of powerful passions, and was not thinking through the reasons for her action. Perhaps. Let's get into other examples. Children, kids, I think that's a good example too. Children, with really no fault of their own, are such early stage of their intellectual development that they kind of have to rely on the advice, information, and counsel that they receive from their parents, from their teachers, and from leaders in their own community. Children don't yet have the full intellectual maturity or reason to be held to the same intellectual standards as adults. But certainly they're not the best critical thinkers. Children famously agree with almost anything they're told as long as they like or trust the person that they're hearing it from. And we hope that as we become adults, we move on from those habits and take judgment for our own beliefs a little more seriously. Larissa, you're going over the case of Biden. I mean, I don't know. A person's ability to speak articulately is not necessarily always associated with their intellectual acumen. I mean, there have been criticisms of the speech habits of presidents of both parties and candidates of both parties. I don't know. I've heard it said that he's suffered from a stutter since being a child. And if you go back, you'll hear some of his statements sound that way throughout his career. I don't know, 50-year political career, it's not like you can get elected over and over again by force. People have to vote for you. But maybe, there's something to be said about the presentation of speech. We're going to talk about language and effective communication. A good critical thinker is an effective communicator. So maybe that's one tool that he could have honed a little bit better in his long political career. I don't know. Delusional sports fan bases, perhaps people who will never take an argument seriously that provides a fair-minded criticism of their franchise or favorite player. Devoutly religious people sometimes, maybe so, if there's evidence that runs contrary to a committed religious position and the person just refuses to engage with the idea or with the evidence, that could be seen in that light. So anyway, guys, let's go back to some topics I want to lecture on in addition to this. The first move, though, in our class is just to give you a very basic overview of the larger picture. We're trying to be good critical thinkers. We're trying to make progress towards that standard. We want to be more like the sort of person who asks for reasons and evidence before we're willing to just believe something. And we also want to be less like the sort of person who just believes things for no good reason and makes claims boldly, but that they can't even back themselves up. Okay, conspiracy theorists, vegan extremists, other examples maybe of bad critical thinkers. Just being vegan or vegetarian, I don't think by itself implies anything about a person's ability to think critically. But some people have alternative diets that are way out of control on either side. Anti-mask people, at least within that form of behavior, I would say they're ignoring the wealth of evidence that is very important towards minimizing the extent of the pandemic. But like I was going to say, people have the carnivore diet and stuff. Have you heard about this? Some people are saying all you need is beef and water, eggs, dairy, just eat everything animal products, eliminate completely whole food groups like fruits and vegetables. People saying that are not health experts, and that runs contrary to well-established findings of nutritional experts. And it runs counter to dietary guidelines provided by the United States Food and Drug Administration, which we've had for a long time. But that's just one example. I can also imagine people who say, let's make sure that our pets are vegan and make sure that people, never consume anything from an animal. To say that that's the surefire way for all your best health outcomes is also, I think, not well based on evidence. Okay, so psychics, we'll talk about pseudoscience, psychic readings, and so forth, tarot cards, palm gazing, crystal balls. Those would, I think, also be found within pseudoscience, which is kind of a branch of poor critical thinking. Okay, so let's move ahead. I want to say something next about the topic of argument, okay? Because we all need to know what is an argument. So I'm erasing this. So what is an argument? Now, what I've said to you so far is that good critical thinkers are good at dealing with arguments. They know how to present them for their own views, to back their views up. They also know how to analyze arguments that are incoming from other sources, because they're not going to believe in a claim that's coming from any source without a good argument. That means, though, that we have to kind of now focus on, well, what's an argument in the formal sense used by logicians and critical thinkers? In the academic sense of the word argument, let me debunk one idea right away. In everyday speech, colloquial, informal speech, we are sometimes used to talking about arguments as if they're like a bad thing with a negative connotation. Like you're thinking, oh, argument. When people get into arguments, that means they're being mean to each other. They're being rude to each other. They're calling each other names, yelling. My parents, they always had arguments, and then they got in a divorce. And so I hate arguments. I think we shouldn't have arguments. Arguments are bad. But no. In the sense used by academics, logicians, and textbooks and courses like this, an argument is a good thing. All it is an attempt to try and prove some claim using reasons. In that sense, arguments are not at all to hurt a person, annoy a person, or criticize their intellectual or moral virtues. It's just to say, here's a belief that I'm trying to justify with some reasons. So we should therefore welcome arguments. We should welcome the presentation and the discussion of views based on the reasons that people can supply. So arguments, I'm basically telling you, at least in the logic sense of the term, are good things. It's not to be confused with people getting at odds and not liking each other, okay? People with deep intellectual respect for each other and great friendships and committed relationships can involve arguments of an intellectual sort, like what I'm saying here. And that does not at all involve animus, dislike, or hostility towards the person with whom you are making or stating the argument. So what's an argument then? To be very precise and formal about it. Okay, so argument. It's just a set of two or more sentences where one sentence is the conclusion of the argument, and all the other sentences are called premises. So arguments are built out of these elements. Every argument is a combination of two parts, a conclusion, and there's only one conclusion of each argument, never zero and never more than one, exactly one. And with arguments, how valid are arguments on a platform like Twitter? Well, Matthew, we can't say in general. It depends on the case by case. Some arguments that are presented on Twitter or in any medium, whether it's print, digital, television, or just everyday communication, can be a good or a bad argument. It depends on the quality of the evidence that is used to justify the conclusion. Let me give you an example of an argument that just fits this description as you see it written here. And we're going to get in the habit of looking at arguments and writing them in this type of format. So right here, for example, I'm going to put down an argument. Here's what I'm going to do so I can clear the board. I'm going to type that definition in the chat for those that have not yet been able to see it on the board or write it down, and then I'm going to clear the board and we'll get into the example. Okay, so here in the chat, I'm just going to type out definition of argument. Okay, so there in the chat you see the typed out definition that I've written here on the board. Okay, so I'm going to clear this. Now the definition's in the chat. Okay, so like for example, here look at this argument. All men were born on earth. Okay, so help me fill out the rest of the argument. Give me just the name of a real man in this world right now, that person name, a real person that we've all heard, that we're all familiar with. Anybody in the whole world. What's one of those people? Just waiting for you to get that response. Let's see it. Neil Armstrong, Dr. Vulich, Trump, Kobe Bryant, Dennis Rodman, a lot of examples. I like the example of Kanye West. So let's, not saying I like Kanye West per se in general, but maybe I do, maybe I don't. Anyway, let me give you the example here. All men were born on earth. Kanye West is a man. Sorry, get the W right here. Okay, so what would be the conclusion here that you would draw from those premises? All men are born on earth. Kanye West is a man. Therefore, so what? What's the conclusion, you think? I'll just wait for you to get the conclusion. All men were born on earth. Kanye West is a man. Can you draw the conclusion? Can you deduce? Ah, yes, that he was born on earth. Good, exactly. Therefore, Kanye was born on earth. Even though sometimes he seems to be from another planet. Okay, now we're just going to quickly examine some of the elements of this argument here. This is just a sample argument. This is not like an argument that a typical person would make in ordinary life. But at the least, it's an example that we can just use for the purposes of instruction and demonstration. Now, the argument that you see here is written in what is called standard form. So let me try and explain that for a moment. You guys are funny with Kanye. Okay, so standard form of an argument. This is not part of the argument. This is just notes here below. Okay, so standard form of a logical argument is going to look like this. You place the conclusion of the argument at the bottom. Okay, and then you have all of the premises listed above. Basically, that's it. So the conclusion is at the bottom. That's the bottom line. And all the premises are listed above it. Okay, standard form. The conclusion is at the bottom, and all the premises are listed above. Now, in this argument, here's the conclusion. It's the statement that Kanye West was born on the earth. And I mean, if a person said that, and you were like curious, well, what is the argument? Give me the argument. Why do you think he was born on earth? I mean, it's an unlikely conversation to actually happen, but the person might be able to say as follows. Well, okay, here's my reasons. All men were born on earth. He's a man. So therefore, you know, he was born on earth too. In this case, this is the conclusion, and these are the two premises. Another little word about the standard form that I'm talking about. The conclusion's at the bottom. There's a horizontal line that divides the conclusion from the premises above. Okay, so we've seen the definition of standard form. I'm going to put it in the chat just to make sure it's clear, then I can erase it. So just so that we can focus on just the argument and remove the other info for a minute, I wrote the definition in the chat. Let me see and make sure I'm getting all of you guys' comments and stuff. Okay. So this kind of like saying, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it must be a duck, comes from. I don't know if that's where this type of saying comes from. Oftentimes people use examples like this when they do intro logic classes. A classical one that's been around for like thousands of years is, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, and therefore Socrates is mortal. So I'm just trying to put a little more contemporary spin on it by changing up the premises and conclusion, but it's the same kind of format essentially. Now look at this. This horizontal line here, this is the divider that divides the premises from the conclusion. And so you're always going to have that line that appears right above the conclusion and the premises above that. The premises are, in this case, numbered, and that makes clear that they're separate premises. You have to also remember this, that when you're writing out an argument in standard form in logic, you're not supposed to write it like you're writing just like an essay or a poem, like where the line just continues on. So when you finish one premise, you have to jump the line to the next one. It's the equivalent of hitting return on the keyboard. So basically each premise receives its own horizontal ledger line. What you cannot do, all I'm saying, it would not be standard form if you were to like write both of these on the same horizontal line. Like all men were born on earth, Kanye West is a man. Like that has to be divided from the next premise. So when one premise sentence ends, it's period, and then you go down to the next line and provide the next premise and go on in that way. Now, how many premises can there be in an argument? There could be 2, there could be 1, there could be any number. There just cannot be 0. It's not an argument if there's just one claim, because in that case, there's no evidence that's been given to justify the claim. Okay? So, like, let me give you a question, see if you can think through to the answer. I'm going to say this. America is the best country in the world. Is that an argument? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Tell me whether that is an argument or not, and if it is or isn't, why or why not. America is the best country in the world. Have I made an argument? Okay, Job, good. Matthew, maybe it is a fact, but I'm not asking that. I'm asking a different question. I'm asking, is that statement an argument? And I see many of you saying no, and that's the right answer. Why is it not an argument? It's because there has been no evidence or reasons given. Now, could an argument be made for the conclusion that America is the best country? Certainly, yes. But what would that argument have to involve? There would have to be some premises, which you surely could construct. You could say the United States is the wealthiest country with the most powerful military. Therefore, we are the greatest country in the world. Or you could say America has the most enduring constitution and the most powerful democratic traditions. Therefore, we're the greatest country in the world. Or you can say America toppled fascism in World War II and advanced the cause of civil rights in the civil rights era, and therefore is the greatest country in the world. There's a lot of arguments that people can and do make for this conclusion. But just the statement by itself with no reasons given at all is not an argument, it's merely an assertion, okay? So for you to have an argument, it can never be one sentence by itself, even if the sentence is true. So earlier when you said here, for example, let me get here, Matthew, well, you retracted the message, but it wasn't a bad thing to say because you mentioned that it seems to be a fact that America is the greatest country. Some might argue with that or disagree with that and come up with a different argument based on different premises, right? But a sentence alone, even if it's true, doesn't count as an argument in the technical sense unless we've got some combination of premises with the conclusion. Okay, so let me make sure that I'm getting everyone's comments now. It's an opinion, sure. But just because something is an opinion does not mean that it cannot be a part of an argument. A conclusion, in many cases, is a person's opinion. But it has to be backed by reasons to count as a logical argument. Okay, good. Yeah, conclusion with no premises, exactly. The person didn't give a reason, exactly. Okay, right. So Alexis, I like your question, and that is a perfect question because I was just going to mention that. So I want to give you guys a little bit of a definition of premise and conclusion now that we're getting more familiar with that terminology. Okay, so the conclusion, first of all, what is it in definition of the term? The conclusion of an argument is the statement, the claim that you are trying to prove to be true. You're trying to persuade or convince or demonstrate somehow that that claim is true. That's the whole point of making the argument, to try and put forward that claim. So the conclusion is the claim that you are trying to prove to be true. Okay? The claim that you're trying to prove to be true. These are just, and this is where you had a good intuition there. It is the reasons or the evidence that is supposed to support the conclusion. Premises. The reasons / evidence, because those are kind of synonymous, that support the conclusion. Okay, now I know it's a little low on the board, so I'm going to type that into the chat. Just give me 1 second. John, you say if you feel like your opinion is right, can you make it a fact? The world is the thing which determines what the facts are or are not. I mean, you can make something a fact if you do something that is corresponding with what you said you would do. So if I say, I'm going to take off these glasses, and then I do it, I mean, I made the statement become true because I said something and then I made the world correspond to it. But you can't just make the world be a certain way by thinking it. Like, I can't say the world is flat, so that's a fact. If it's not flat, then I just have a false belief. Okay, so premises and conclusion. Conclusion, the claim you want to show to be true. Premises, the reasons or evidence that back the conclusion up. So here we go. Okay. Cool. By making other people think it. Well, by making people think something, that doesn't necessarily make it true. It means that the people believe it. If I get everybody to believe the Earth is flat, it's still not flat. It's just then a widespread false belief, which, if you know, at a certain past time in history, that was the predominant belief of a lot of people, clearly an earlier historical time period. Is belief then unwise because it is trusting without knowing, without fact? No, we believe things sometimes based on good evidence. And in that case, we have a justification for the belief. We are not going to ever be perfect and have 100% accuracy with all of our beliefs, but the best we can do is to try and form beliefs in a way that's based on good evidence, and that gives us a higher probability, at least, of being correct. Let me give you another example of an argument here. This one is just kind of like, you know, it's not a typical argument that we make in real life, because nobody disagrees that Kanye West was born on Earth, as strange as it may seem at times. Let me give you another example to just kind of multiply the possible examples. Okay, so like Jones' fingerprint are on the murder weapon. Second premise, Jones had a motive to kill Smith. Therefore, Jones is the culprit. He's the killer, basically. Now, in this example here on the board, the conclusion of the argument, as you can see, is that Jones is guilty of this crime. He committed the murder. He's the culprit. He's the guilty party, the perpetrator. But if it was just that statement, that would not be any kind of rational argument. But it becomes a rational argument because in this case, we imagine, there are two reasons that have been provided. Number one, Jones' fingerprint were discovered to be on the murder weapon, recovered from the crime scene. Number two, Jones, we learn, had some kind of motive against, that he had a desire to kill Smith. So putting those two pieces of evidence together, maybe we made at least one type of argument towards the conclusion that he's guilty. So whenever we have arguments, there's got to be a conclusion, something you're trying to prove, to show to be true, and then you've got to have at least one premise. An argument cannot exist if there is no premises at all. Then it's just a statement, but it's not based on reasons. Okay? So let's see what else is in here. See some very deep and interesting discussions going on about the rationality of religious belief. I would say this about the question of religion. There are arguments that people study in philosophy for the conclusion that God exists, and there are arguments to the contrary. So theists and atheists of the world that really pursue deeper research into their intellectual foundation of their belief, they will give arguments. That's actually something that I'm responsible for teaching when I teach intro to philosophy. So the classical ontological argument for God's existence, the cosmological argument, something can't come from nothing, and here's the universe, stuff like that. Arguments can be given. But of course, there are critics of those arguments too. Now, you're an independent individual with your own intellect, and you are going to then be the one in your life to adjudicate the various arguments and conclusions to come up with your own belief system and your own worldview. All that I can really do, and all I want to do, I certainly don't want to tell anybody what to believe, is to give you the intellectual tools that you need to make good arguments and to evaluate the quality of arguments, okay? But that does not mean that you're going to be a theist or an atheist, because it just depends on your appreciation of the arguments that do exist. In other areas of life where there's less ambiguity, I think we can come to more of a consensus over some of the argumentative conclusions and positions that we do have. Okay. So, Jamie, you're asking about the line. Some of you have mentioned this line here. Well, when you jump over this line and you state the conclusion, you're basically going to say what is called a conclusion indicator word. Okay? So, let me tell you about that term. Conclusion indicator words. So there are certain words in our language that indicate that the next statement that you're going to either read or hear is the conclusion of a logical argument. Some of these are already, I believe, hardwired into your own vocabulary right now. It's just that you've not been instructed as to their formal role in logical argument. But I bet you if I ask you right now, what are some conclusion indicator words? Tell me what are some examples of them. So like a word you would say right before you state that Jones is the culprit. So if we were reading it, yeah, Jones is the culprit is the conclusion. That's right. Jones' fingerprints are on the murder weapon. Jones had a motive to kill Smith. Then right before someone says this sentence, they will use a word like good, Jamie, the word therefore. Okay. Jillian, I understand the example of finally, but it's not quite right because finally can just mean something happened last, not necessarily that it is a logical consequence of the prior statements. So therefore is definitely one of them. So is another one. Thus is another one. So let me write some of these down. The most famous and well-known is probably therefore, but it's not the only one. There are other synonyms for that. There is, Matthew, not whence, but hence. Whence means from which. Hence means to which. So there's therefore, thus, so, hence. Let's see what else I see there. Consequently, yes, that's definitely one of them. As a result, I see that also. Let's see. Yeah, so that exact word or any of those words would easily fit in the role of the conclusion indicator. Jones's fingerprints are on the murder weapon. Jones had a motive to kill Smith, so Jones is the culprit. Or hence, Jones is the culprit, or consequently, Jones is the culprit. As a result, Jones is the culprit. All those are interchangeable, and therefore they're all conclusion indicator words. Now, there are also what are called premise indicator words. I got thus in there, yeah. Another one from Latin that's not so common, but it's sometimes used is ergo. But anyway, there's a lot of possible ways to state a conclusion. There's also what are called premise indicator words. Okay, so I'm going to erase this little bit here, and then let's talk about some of those. So what might be some words which give the sense that not the conclusion, but the premise is about to be mentioned, that you're about to give some of the reasons or evidence which back the conclusion? Let's see. What do you have? For premise indicator word, okay. Not in premise, no. For example, not quite. Let's keep trying. I know we'll get it. So due to the fact would be okay. Yeah. Due to the fact that Jones' fingerprints are on the murder weapon, and let's see if you come up with some more. Not first, because first just means that this is the first thing I'm going to say. It does not mean that this is a reason for something else. But since would definitely work. Since Jones' fingerprints are on the murder weapon, and due to the fact that Jones had a motive to kill Smith, therefore, Jones is the culprit. So let me write down some of the fair examples that we've already put. You said since, due to the fact that. There's a very basic one that we use all the time that I'm hoping some of you will get. Assuming that, yeah, because is actually the one, Brittany, good. I was thinking of, that's very fundamental. We say that one all the time, so let me write that. So like, because Jones' fingerprints are on the murder weapon, and since he had a motive to kill Smith, thus he's the culprit. Since, due to the fact that, because, given that is another fair example of a premise indicator term. Given that Jones' fingerprints are on the murder weapon, and since he did have a motive to kill Smith, consequently, he's the culprit. Assuming that would also be okay. Given that, due to the fact that, because of, since. As you can see, I think you could say as, you know, like in Congress when they start a bill, it'll be like whereas. So like, whereas Jones' fingerprints are on the murder weapon, and as he had a motive to kill Smith, he's therefore the culprit. Maybe it's a little more formal way of speaking, but that would be okay. Could be a case with a plot twist. Yeah, some of you guys have picked on the example a little, like, is that good enough evidence to know maybe the murder weapon was planted by the true perpetrator, and maybe the motive was not a salient enough reason for him to actually commit murder? I understand that. It's just a hypothetical example. In a real court case, you would have to make a much more, I think, detailed argument. But having the guy's fingerprint on the weapon would make some credibility towards the conclusion of their guilt. We'd have to hear the argument given by the defense to see how there could still be reasonable doubts established. In a real case, not a made-up hypothetical case, there's going to be a whole bunch of facts, forensic facts, character information, and other things to inform the belief. Free Jones, that's pretty funny. Hashtag Free Jones. Okay, so anyways, what I've told you here are that when you listen to people speak and you hear words like this, that indicates something. That is telling you they're giving me some type of attempt towards a logical argument. So if it's something even very simple, like, since you, since my friend is sick, therefore I don't think he's going to attend the class. You know, like, that's a very basic idea, but it's just something where you say, here's a reason, and this is the conclusion that I'm drawing from that. Bobby Shmurda, yeah, I don't know. Isn't he going to be up for parole? I thought maybe he was going to be out this year, but he's served a lot of time. Okay. Cool. Now, the next thing I wanted to do, if I can, with a little bit of time, yeah, this broadcast is going to be permanently archived and posted on this channel. So you can look at it later. You You can view it anytime in the semester for your review, for your own just interests, or for your study. Okay. Next, I want to talk to you all about two more very important concepts. If I can, if I can't, then we'll pick up with this on Monday next week. But all important, the word truth. Now remember, finish this statement for me. The whole point of making these arguments is to try and persuade or convince people that the conclusion is what? What's the whole point? You make an argument to try and show that the conclusion's what? TK, I mean, I don't know. I don't know the facts of his case, but I heard he might actually did it. Okay, you say true. Exactly, guys, true. The whole point of an argument is to establish the truth of the conclusion to some reasonable individual or audience. What else would be the point of making the argument? You're trying to convince other people. If you already believe it, you're not convincing yourself, although you might have to rehearse arguments in your mind to come up with your own conclusions. But typically we make these arguments amongst each other because we're trying to make the case for the conclusion that it's true. But now we have to really drill down on that for a minute and stop and ask, what does it mean for a statement to be true? Now, when I ask the question, what does it mean for a sentence to be true, as I always do in the first meeting of these kind of classes, I noticed that it's a little bit tricky at first. You use the word all the time. You said it real clearly when I asked you, what are we trying to do with these arguments? Prove the conclusion to be true. Okay. But one of the weird kind of mystifying things is that when you take a philosophy class and the professor says to you, but what does truth mean? What's the definition of the word truth? It's a little hard at first to put your finger on exactly the concept's meaning, but we will get it out. So let's see what you would say. If I'm telling you, I don't know, like for example, I'm wearing glasses. Is that true? Yeah. So based off maybe examples like that, what do you think it means when a sentence is true? Or, I don't know, Canada's to the north of the United States. That's true too. But what does it mean when a sentence is true? What's the definition of something being true? If it's true, what are we saying? If the sentence is true, what do we mean? Okay, Miguel, you say based on factual evidence, Alexis proven with evidence. Good, but I need to make one slight correction. Brittany, I like your suggestion. Facts that align with an argument or statement. Good, and Sebastian, your suggestion is also quite good, factually correct. Let me say something about the other examples that some are mentioning, proven by evidence. It's not actually that true statements have to be something that we have evidence to prove. Let me give you a weird example, okay? Suppose that there was a person out there who had committed murder, and they disposed of the body in a remote location in such a careful way that no one's ever going to find the person. Okay, so what the truth is, that person was murdered. But it can still be true even though nobody knows that. Suppose that the murderer himself committed suicide like a week later, and so there's no living person in the whole world at that time who has any evidence or has any awareness that that is a fact. But would it still be a true fact that the person was murdered? Yes, because it doesn't become true when someone learns about it later. It was already true, just unknown, okay? So do you understand what I'm saying? Something can be true that we don't yet have evidence to prove. We still want to have evidence to base our beliefs on, though, because that's the most reasonable and reliable way to get to a true conclusion. But there can be things that are true that are not known to anybody, that there's no evidence to justify. So the right way of explaining it then has more to do with the suggested responses by some of you that it's just something that's factually correct. So let me write down the precise way I would put it for you. It's truth. Truth exists when whatever a sentence is saying matches the actual facts of reality. So when what a sentence says matches the facts of reality. Okay, so If I'm telling you right now I'm wearing glasses, that's true. That's something that I'm saying, but I'm not just saying it, it's also like really happening. If I told you though I'm wearing a hat, I could say that. I could say anything, but that's not actually true. As you could just see, I'm not. So sentences either match the facts or they don't. When they match and line up with the way the world really is, then that's a true statement. Otherwise, it's a false statement. Now, false statements. If I told you that I was wearing a hat, that's not true. Sometimes people say things that are false deliberately in order to mislead people. That's lying or deception. In other cases, people pass along false information not because they think it's false, but because they're misinformed, and that's misinformation. Like, I don't know, like after some like school shooting or something, somebody says, oh, there were that chaos and confusion. They might be saying something that they think is true, but they're actually providing false information. Now, we're critical thinkers, or we're trying to be, and as critical thinkers and good reasoners and just everyday people, we would really want, if we could possibly do it, to only have beliefs that are what you think. We really should only want to believe in things that are what? What is that? We really should, and I hope you agree, we only want to believe in things that are actually, what do you think? The whole point of the class really is trying to get us towards this outcome. That when you go about your business in the world and you try and figure out what to believe, that at the end of the day, you only end up with beliefs that are true, exactly. Because if your head is filled with false beliefs, then by definition of the term true and false, you think that there's certain things happening in this world, but that's not really happening. And that person who has a bunch of false beliefs is living in a imaginary version of reality. They're kind of disconnected from the facts. So critical thinkers are a little better at getting to a correct appreciation of truth and falsehood, and they can distinguish true from false claims. Now, we're never going to be perfect. It's not like you're ever going to get to a state where everything you believe is true and you don't even have one false belief in your whole belief system. But the best that we can do is guard against developing false beliefs by insisting that we have good evidence and arguments to base our beliefs upon. Okay? So let me see some of the comments that I've seen in the chat here, making sure I get to them. Apples are the best fruit because they are red. I mean, that would be an interesting, if someone said apples are red, therefore they are the best fruit. Would it be an argument? It would be an argument. It's just, I guess, not a great argument because the color of something reasonably is not necessarily associated with its suitability or desirability, you know, at least in terms of its taste as a piece of food. But that would be an argument. You can make an argument out of any premise and conclusion. Some of those are going to be bad arguments if the premise is irrelevant to the conclusion. Like if I tell you I'm wearing glasses, therefore Trump will be reelected, I mean, that's not a very good reason for that conclusion. There could be reasons for that conclusion if a person thinks that's likely to happen and they gave those reasons. But what I just gave you is a pretty weird, wacky argument based on a reason that's irrelevant to the conclusion. So understand that argument can be very broad, but we really hope to make good arguments in this kind of class and in our lives. Okay, I'm going down and seeing more. Jillian, you say, like The Truman Show. In the movie The Truman Show, maybe some of you have seen it. This is a pretty good movie from the 90s with Jim Carrey, where his entire reality was like a false construct, and he never learned that until like his adult life, that he was just being viewed by people like in a reality television show. So his whole life was kind of, in a way, all full of false beliefs. Now, unless you harbor, I would say, pretty extreme views about the presence of truth in the world around you, I don't think we would go as far as Truman. But, you know, after all, some people do think that skepticism is viable. Quizzes via email as well. Yes, Nasser, I will do that. Not to worry. You're not going to receive the distribution of the first homework assignment until next week. And when I do assign it to you, you're going to have over a week to work on it, and you'll be given some clear instructions on how to complete it. So not to worry. The assignment's coming next week. But I like your zest for getting right into the course and starting to do the assignments. That reminder email sent out at 3 was for everyone, right? Yes, it was for everyone. I don't know if you received it at 3. I sent it right before 2:30, and sometimes it takes like 30 minutes for it to post. I just did it as a backup. in case anybody didn't notice my prior messages. Oh, and here, important thing, I'm about to end the meeting today. We're going to pick up next time. We're going to finish some of these notes on argument and truth and belief. But Gabby, you mentioned to me in the office hours earlier that the textbook seems to be available for students for free through your student web portal. Maybe, Gabby, if you could type into the chat what exactly you did to get to that version of the book, because this was not known to me. I didn't know that our staff had perhaps uploaded a digital copy of the book, which I think all the students would really want to have access to. Yeah. So Gabby, put it in the chat, and then there will be a permanent record for everyone to look at, because it was the first time I had heard of that. Yeah, I can only act on the basis of the information that I had at the time. All that I'm responsible for doing is forwarding the textbook information to our staff, and then they're responsible together with the bookstore for getting the book and getting you guys in touch with the book. Student portal. It says only free for the first 2 weeks. Okay, Judy, interesting. So listen, everybody, I don't want to pass false information to you, but Gabby had access to a copy of the text. Other students seem to understand that that's temporary access that will not last throughout the duration of the course. So you will have to then see which of these two claims is true. In a group chat or something else, perhaps people can get in touch. I think, though, that this makes sense, because it made little sense to me when Gabby said there's just a free copy of the book on the student portal. In my mind, I was thinking, how can the publisher wish for everyone to gain free access to the book? But I have no problem with that. It makes a little more sense if, in fact, they provide temporary access for students maybe at the beginning of the term with the expectation that they'll buy the book before the period of time ends. So go to Student Portal, and under Titanium, I'm close the lecture in a minute, but I need to let Gabby finish describing this. Okay, this is something that students know better than professors. I'm hearing a number of you guys saying in the chat that most of the textbooks are free for 2 weeks. I think what Gabby's describing is the way to gain access to the free copy of the textbook for the first couple of weeks. Ironically, though, our use of the textbook is really only going to kick in midway into the second week. So this may be something that is a benefit, but of limited value, because you'll lose access to it once the portion of the course that uses it most heavily starts. At any rate, everybody, you know that you should get the book. Don't fear. It seems that if you have already ordered it, you have not actually wasted your money, because all the other students that have access to it may have that access expire. If, Gabby, you are correct and there's no time limit on it, then that's something that you guys will let me know about. But this is outside of anything I'm tasked with knowing about precisely, because it has to do with the bookstore and our staff. But yeah, try and do what Gabby is describing here in the chat, and then we'll see how it works. I really should let you guys go, though, because we're running late. You're asking, do you have anything to do between now and next week? No. You just have to attend the next lecture, and then the pages of the book that you're going to have to start reading are going to be commencing next Wednesday. So between now and Monday, you can think about the topics I've raised here. You can play back the lecture, but I just want you to enjoy your weekend. We're definitely going to use the book a lot, but for the first 2 meetings, I'm giving you guys a general introduction to primary concepts of logic that the book only glosses over. So the book will heavily be used, but not until next Wednesday. My cats, let me let them out. Hey, guys. Well, they're being a little shy. I'm really sorry that I had to put them back in the room. I hate to make them cooped up, but they were making the lecture kind of difficult. Okay. Erica's right. You're saying Erica is right about Vital Source is only free till September 8th. After that, if you don't opt out, you get charged from the Titan bookstore. Okay, guys, that sounds like authoritative information. This book will not be free for the entire semester. It's free until September 8th. And then after that, those who have not opted out of Vital Source will get charged for it, which almost sounds a little bit like a gimmick, but you know, you guys will let me know how your experience works out with that. Okay. Take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy. And I'm just going to be signing off. Little Peaches right here. I'm going to go get in a run. And hopefully you guys have a great weekend. Okay, guys. Thanks so much again. I'm glad we cleared that up. Someone's talking about Z Library. I'll leave that to you guys to figure out. But I have to end the live stream because I got to go. So take care, all right? Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.